you'll find our passage today in Mark chapter 10, verses 35 through 45. I want to look over a story that you're probably familiar with and bring it maybe in some new light as we think about God's Word this morning. And as I begin, this passage has a lot to do with seating. And there's a lot that goes into where we're going to sit. A lot of times, we're unconsciously making decisions that in the back of our mind, a lot of things are happening. I mean, just think about why you're sitting where you are today. Maybe you think, well, this is my seat. I always sit here. I sure hope that if a visitor sits there, that's not what you think. But maybe you chose your seat because you thought, man, if I got to go to the bathroom, I want to be at the back. Maybe that's why all the back row Baptists are back there. Their bathrooms are not that big, so you're going to have to time it right. Maybe you picked your seat based on you wanted to be closer to see, or you wanted to be further away, or you wanted to be noticed, or you did not want to be noticed. It's amazing all the things that go into just a simple decision like that when we stop and think about it, isn't it? Of course, seating can also display honor. If you think about the seating at a wedding, right? When you're putting a wedding together and you're thinking about the rehearsal and who's going to sit where and who's going to sit with who, there's a lot that goes into that, isn't it? One time in 2010, I was asked to come and to pray for our Republican primary candidates who were going through all of the counties of Nevada. And they had come to Mineral County there where I was a pastor. And so I came in, and they were all there. I came in, and they told me, go sit at the front at the table with all the candidates. And so I went and sat at the front. They were all there. They were all, mucking around, talking. And I just sat down quietly and listened to their conversation. It was a big year because we had, I believe we had congressional and we had a gubernatorial election. And so there was a lot of candidates there, all wanting to get the top spot. And so I'm sitting there at the table, and they're just going on. And in all reality, the conversation was pretty coarse and at times vulgar. And eventually, one of the candidates turned and looked at me and said, "Why did they let you sit here? Why did you get the prominent seat with the guests of honor?" And I said, "Well, I'm the pastor of First Southern Baptist Church here in Hawthorne, and I've come here to pray and ask God's blessings on you." It was amazing how the conversations changed after that. It was really interesting. But we realize that where we sit, it does show honor sometimes. And in our text today, we're going to be talking about where we sit and where the rank is and how we think about such things. We're going to see in our text that pride in our hearts often leads us to seek positions and power. Pride in our hearts seeks favoritism that we do not deserve. It creates envy for those who have more prominence and more influence. And this goes against everything that Jesus taught and Jesus modeled. Because Jesus came not to be served, but as a servant, to come and to even give his life as a ransom for many. It's an upside-down thought process to it. It is God's wisdom. If we wish to be elevated in Christ's kingdom, we must not be leader of all. We must not be the most noteworthy of all. We must not be the most name-dropped of all. We must be servant of all. Look with me at the text. Mark chapter 10, we'll begin reading in verse 35 if you follow along. "And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came to him and said to him, 'Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you.' And he said to them, 'What do you want me to do for you?' And they said to him, 'Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left hand in your glory.' And Jesus said to them, 'You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism that I am to be baptized?' And they said to him, 'We are able.' And he said to them, 'The cup that I drink, you will drink. The baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand and at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they became indignant to James and John. And Jesus called them and said to them, "Do you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and that their great ones exercise authority over them? But it shall not be among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." In this passage, we see the ugliness of selfish ambition, don't we? We see truly how it rules and comes out in our hearts. James and John come to Jesus, and they're asking to be the top dogs. They're asking that he would appoint them to the best spot. And really, if we think about it, we often live this way also. You see, James and John, they're not coming to Jesus and asking who's going to be number one. They know who's number one, right? Jesus is number one. What they're asking is, who's number two? And we in our lives often live the same way. If you're a believer in Jesus, if you're a disciple of Jesus, it is not in your mind to think that you will be greater than Jesus or that you want to be greater than Jesus. And so for that, we think we're pretty humble and we're pretty good. But hey, Jesus, could I be number two? We do, don't we? And Jesus here gives us this example, we'll see, that a question and the pursuit shouldn't be who's number two. The question and pursuit should be, who can I serve? Just as Jesus did. There's a few things that I want us to see in this text as we just kind of walk through it. The first thing that we see in this text is a selfish request. We see a selfish request. Verse 35, it starts off like this. I love this. James and John, sons of Zebedee, come up to him and say, "Teacher, we want you to do whatever we ask of you." Have you ever had a child, your kid, come up to you and say, "Dad, I'm going to ask you something and I want you to say yes," right? Or maybe your wife comes up to you and says, "I'm going to ask you something, I want you to say yes." That's an expensive question. But that's what they do, don't they? They come right up to Jesus and they say, I want to ask you, we're going to ask you, so whatever we ask of you, we want you to do it for us, right? Now we look at that and we go, how foolish. But for many, that's the way that they regard prayer. Prayer is nothing more than if I ask God, He's got to give it to me. I've named it and I've claimed it and I'm believing it, and so He has to give it to me. I rubbed the magic genie lamp and I said the right words, and so I'm just going to sit back and wait. We forget to pray as Jesus taught us, that we, in our prayers, say, "Thy kingdom come, Thy will be done," in surrender to all that God would have that we may not see. What makes them think that they could ask for such things, to sit at the right hand and at the left hand of Jesus? That's kind of an interesting question, right? Like, why were they thinking that they were better than the other disciples? Well, there's one reason that you may have forgotten or may have never heard. And that is that James and John here, their mother is Salome, and she is Mary's cousin, or Mary's sister. So they're first cousins to Jesus. James and John are first cousins to Jesus. So it might seem like, hey, we're in the family. Do we get to sit on the right, and do we get to sit on the left? Another reason why that all of them, including the other disciples, may be indignant is Jesus did tell them in Matthew 19:28 that they would have thrones and powers and positions in the kingdom as disciples. You see, but the problem is that they hear things such as that, and they think of their position and their closeness to Jesus, and they think, well, I must be good enough to be number two. I want to be number two. And so even in somewhat of a kind of a humble state, this pride still sneaks through. Do you see that? The same thing happens with us, isn't it? We can be prideful and serve the church. We can be prideful and serve others, thinking, I'm going to do this to get another jewel in my crown. I'm climbing the spiritual ladder. I ain't sitting in the cheap seats of heaven. Jesus exposes and shows how such pride is wrong, how such pride hinders our walk with Christ, how such pride hinders our relationships with other believers. You know, here's what really bothers me about this request. If you're looking at your text there in chapter 10, and you look at the preceding passages, even the preceding passages, Jesus first says, let the little children come to me. Those that are like these children are the ones that will be in the kingdom of God. Not selfishness there, right? Just simple faith and trust and love. And then you have the story of the rich man who, for his own pride and his own desire of things and stuff, says that it's too much to give up everything and follow Jesus. And then Jesus foretells his death. Look at verse 33. See, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and to the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over the Gentiles, and they will mock him, and they will spit on him, and they will flog him, and they will kill him. And after 3 days he will rise. Hey, Jesus, do I get to be number 2? Do you see that? If you read Mark is a master of what we call the Markan sandwich. Right? Theologians make up weird things sometimes. The Markan sandwich. And what Mark does is he often takes a number of passages that are combined together in a larger section that you have that contrast. And you have that contrast here, don't you? You have the faith of children. You have a rich man who won't follow Jesus. You have Jesus telling what is going to happen, his death. And then you have the disciples bickering and fighting over who gets the top seat under Jesus. They didn't understand what Jesus had come to do yet. They didn't understand what would happen. Of course, we know this as he goes to the cross and they depart from him, and it's not until after the resurrection that he gathers them together. And then in the book of Acts, when the Holy Spirit comes upon them, and we see them as these faithful witnesses that Jesus wishes that they would be. But again, the problem with the disciples there is the same problem that we often have. We're more concerned about our glory than God's glory. We're more concerned about how we're going to get ahead instead of how the name of Jesus gets proclaimed. We're more worried about how we might look than to make Jesus look glorious. We want to be number 2. Second thing that you see here is a humbling response. We see a selfish request, and then we see a humbling response. Jesus responds to them, and you know, if you're just reading the story for the first time, you're like, how is he going to, what's he going to say to that? And he tells them, he kind of plays a word, he kind of plays games with them a little bit here. He says, do you know what you're asking? Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism with I am baptized? And here's the best part of verse 39. Look what they say. Yeah, we can do that. We're game. They had no clue. They still did not understand. They couldn't stand, watch, and pray for Jesus in the garden. And yet they have the pride and the arrogance here because they're worried about who's going to be number 2 and can I get that top dog seat? Sure, I can do that. That's no problem. And they miss what Jesus is trying to tell them, what Jesus is showing them. The word cup here is talking about an experience. The experience, and cup is also often compared with wrath, this cup poured out. Think about the prayer that Jesus prays in the Garden of Gethsemane. He says, Father, if you could withhold this cup. That's what's referenced there. This cup of wrath, all that it will mean for Christ to go to the cross, to take the sins of the world upon himself and to suffer the wrath of God for our sins in our place. The cup in which he will be baptized or immersed, that this will come upon him. That's the experience that he's about to go through. And they say, sure, we can do that. They don't understand. And the reality of it is this. When we're so concerned about ourselves, when we're so concerned about our selfish desires, when we're so concerned about trying to see if we can be number two, we often miss the simple teachings that Jesus has for us. We miss the things that Jesus would have for us because we completely misunderstand what he's trying to teach us. That's what they did there, right? They should have responded and said, you know what, you're right. We're not going to the cross. We're not doing all the things that were just said in the previous verses. But instead, they're so focused on their own pride, they're so focused on getting to the top that they go, sure, we can do that. In our own lives, when we're ruled by selfish ambition, even as disciples of Christ, even for good things for Christ. That's the sneaky part of pride, isn't it? The sneaky part of pride for a pastor is to think, man, look at how I'm serving Jesus and look what he's doing because of what I'm doing. Right? And then we can go to our meetings together and I can tell you how to do it just like I do because I've got it all figured out. And it's pride. Who's number two? Jesus gives them a humbling revelation. He continues to teach them. He says to them, the cup I drink, you will drink. The baptism which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right and to sit at my left is not mine to grant. It is for those for whom it has been prepared. Jesus is prophesying to them here right now. I don't know that they fully understand it. But they will experience the punishment to a degree that Jesus experiences. We're told that all of the apostles, except for John, suffer a martyr's death. John dies of natural age, but not without being persecuted and exiled to the island of Patmos. They all will taste a part of that, but Jesus tells them here, it's not for you. This is for God to decide. Do you remember the parable of the talents? The parable of the talents in Matthew? Jesus tells a parable of three servants. A master's going to go away, and there's three servants, and he gives each one of them a sum of money, a talent. And to one he gives 5, to another he gives 2, and to one he gives 1. And the servant goes away, and he comes back, and he praises the servants that utilized those resources and gained an investment. They utilized what Jesus had given them, and they went and they did something with it, and something amazing happened. But one just buried it. He just buried it, put it away in a jar, dug a hole, put it there. When the master comes back, he went and got his jar, and he says, look, I still got it. And he's condemned for not utilizing the talent that Jesus had given to him to expand the kingdom, to expand what had happened. Here's a part of that story, though, that we need to remember. One was given 5, one was given 2, one was given 1. It wasn't based on their abilities. It was based just on what the master decided to give them. And so it is with us. God calls us. God gifts us. God, through his providence, leads us, and he puts us where we're to go. He has saved us unto good works that we might walk in them. That's part of our fighter verse this week. He's called us unto good works that we might walk in them. We're foolish to sit around saying, my works are better than yours. My talents are better. He gave me more talents than he gave you. That's what we want to do. And the whole point of why he's assigned such to us is that we would use the gifts and the talents that he gives to us in the way that he would have us to do, because he has loved us, he has gifted us, he has called us, and he has put us in a place that we can serve and we can live for him. But we can't do it if we're always worrying about if I'm going to be number 2. Do you get that? We will miss those opportunities. If we're trying to look out for who's number 2, we're often not looking out for the least of these among us. We're trying to position ourselves over those that we think are greater than us. We see here also a prideful reaction. I mean, if it's not bad enough that his cousins have come up to him and said, "Whatever we ask of you, do it, okay?" But now, word gets back to the other 10. Word gets back to the other 10, verse 41. And when the 10 heard of it, they began to be indignant to James and John. That word indignant means very, very mad. Right? Very angry and acting out anger, not just feeling anger. They started fighting. They started fighting over who's number 2. Now, it doesn't tell us exactly what's going on, but I imagine at one point, the other 10 are kind of disappointed that they didn't think to get the jump on those 2. And on the other end, they're saying, "Why do you think you're better than me?" I can just imagine them all standing there saying, "I helped cast out this demon. I went and got the food for this day. I held the money and did this. I did this. I did this. I did this." And they become angry at each other. I mean, it's just one of those situations where you just see by the end of it, everybody's mad at everybody, right? Over something that they shouldn't have been pursuing in the first place. When we worked in James, you remember the passage that says, "Is it not this that causes quarrels among you? Your passions?" And often it's our passions to get ahead, our passions to be number 2, our passions to get our way. And because of that, we get easily offended. I could go on and on and on about things that I've had to, either against me or things that I've had to step into in the church because people get offended. I seriously had someone mad and leave the church because someone didn't taste their casserole dish. And so they thought that they were just mean, and they're going to go somewhere else. I had a business meeting one time where we were going to remove a header that was they had dividers in a room. There was no need for the dividers. The header was still there. The header was in the way. The header needed to go. Everybody except for one person, because he didn't want to put the effort in it because it's there. Why mess with it? Well, we voted to remodel. We voted to tear the headers down. Marcia, you guys even worked on tearing those headers down. And the next Sunday, he came to church angry, wanted to make a show of it, got his wife and said, "We're leaving," and walk out the door because everybody else voted to take the header down. It's really sad. The things that we do and that we say, and then you know what happens? We made a mistake like that, and we're too embarrassed to ever own up to it. You ever made a mistake like that? You ever done something like that? You've done something that you were so riled up at the time and you acted out on it. Okay, I need to look at the teenagers probably right now. Okay? You get all worked up about something, you say something, you do something, and then you walk away and you feel all big, and then you start thinking about it and you go, "That was probably pretty dumb, right?" But I can't go back and admit it. You can. That's what forgiveness is. We often get upset with others. We become indignant with others. I would imagine that even in this room, there are people who are upset with others for things that happened 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago in this church. You know, God can't work through us when we're acting like that with one another. The disciples, how effective would the disciples have been when the Holy Spirit came down on them in the book of Acts, and we read through the book of Acts of the ministry and the expansion of the church? Would that have happened if they still would have been mad and angry about this and still indignant, fighting with one another? No, it wouldn't. Jesus knows it, and so Jesus works to correct it. He gives them what I'll call a worldview rearrangement. A worldview rearrangement we see here in verses 42 and 45. He says to them, he called them to himself. So he knew what was going on, right? Could you just imagine Jesus watching them fight and bicker? Just like facepalm Jesus, right? I think a lot of times I make Jesus facepalm too. What? No. He calls them together and he said to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them. Their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Jesus doesn't allow their anger to simmer. He calls them back and he addresses head on this high seat seeking that they're trying to do. He addresses it and shows even that worldly wisdom is to jockey for power. Worldly wisdom is to jockey for notoriety. Worldly wisdom is to do anything and everything to make yourself look good and make the other person look bad. It's an election year, by the way. Do we see that happening? True news, fake news, it doesn't matter so long as you're in the news, right? That's what's going on. It's only going to get worse and worse until November comes. That's the way in worldly wisdom that you rule over someone, is you've got to get the power, you've got to get the authority, you've got to get the leverage. You've got to know where the skeletons are in the closet so you can use those things to get yourself ahead of one another. Jesus says that kind of thinking, that kind of action, and that kind of manipulation has no place in the church of God, amongst the people of God. So often, we find that individuals end up in the church that are Diotrephes. Listen in 3 John 9:11. I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I will call attention to what he is doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. Dear friend, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God. Anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. You ever met a Diotrephes in your church? I've had deacons that are Diotrephes. We rule this church. We're over this church. You're going to do what we say, Pastor. I've had church members that think that they're Diotrephes. I had one church where one family gave a considerable amount of the budget, and they always made it a point to remind everyone that they gave a considerable amount to the budget. I learned a whole lot in that church. I would advise you to never come to me and try to use what your giving might be as a way to think that I have to do what you say and not what I think God is saying. Because I learned that lesson. We're always trying to fight to see who's number two. And Jesus says here, we should be servant of all. The expectation is that we should be a servant. He uses two words here in verses 43 and 44. The first word, and some of your translations will show this, some of yours will not. The ESV shows this. It says, first, you must be a servant. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. That's the same word that we get from the word deacon. It means literally to wait tables. It means that dust is kicked up as they wait tables. They're eager and fast to serve. That's what that word, the etymology of that word means. The second word is doulos, which is slave. Jesus says, if you wish to be first, you must see yourself as a servant to all, and you must even see yourself as a slave to all. Does a slave get honor for what they do? No. This is what Jesus says. The idea is that if we want to be recognized, if we want to be respected, if we want to have a place in the kingdom of heaven, we must give up all ambition and selfishness and live out our days seeking to serve others. Finally, Christ gives an example of his own servanthood. He ends here with his example of what it looks like, the model that he has given to us. He says in verse 45, this by the way is, if you're a Bible writer, it might be a place that you underline or you make a little note. This is, most scholars, and I agree, would say that this is the key verse for all of Mark. This is the key verse for all of Mark, where Jesus says, "For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give himself a ransom for many." Mark writes his gospel in such a way that he shows the servant nature of Jesus over and over and over again. When it says here, even, for the Son of God, for even the Son of God, it reminds us of the glory and the majesty of Jesus Christ, who for eternity has existed with God the Father. John tells us that all things were created in him and through him and for him. Jesus Christ, the very Son of God, come incarnate. Jesus Christ, the very fulfillment of the prophecy to David to be the ruler and the king to which his kingdom will never end. Jesus Christ, the one now to who has been given all authority and all glory and all honor in heaven and earth. Jesus Christ, the one who we await, who will come back and rule and reign forever. That Jesus, if anyone deserved to be served, if anyone deserved for a multitude of people to come and wait on hand and foot for any need and any desire and anything that he might want, it would be Jesus. But that's not what he did. He came and he lived as an example to us of how we serve, of how we should live. Think about the night when Jesus is arrested, and before they go to the garden, they're in the upper room, and Jesus bends down and washes the nasty feet of the disciples. That's the job of a slave. It's the lowest job that you can imagine. I don't even like touching my own feet, more or less someone else's. And not only that, but he bends down and he washes the feet of his disciples there before the dinner, and he's washing the feet of those who he knows those very feet are going to walk away from him. He's washing the feet of Judas, who he knows at that moment is going to walk out from that dinner and go to the high priest and come and find him that he would be arrested, his own betrayer. You can't get more of a lowly servant's slave's picture than that, can you? And it says Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give himself as a ransom for many. Service was his passion. Service was his life. The cost of his service was extremely high. Jesus willingly went to the cross to save those who were sinners, for those who rejected him. For you and for me, he suffered shame and pain and humiliation. He endured the agony of the cross for lost sinners. He experienced the undiluted wrath of God's justice for our sin upon himself. He took the place of a common criminal. He took the place of a rebel, the righteous for a rebel, that we might be saved, that we might be forgiven, that he might make atonement, that our sins could be forgiven without us having to die and face the wrath of God for them. Jesus did that. Even though he deserved all majesty and all honor, he is the Son of God. That's what he did for you. That's what he did for me. And he did so willingly. It's a paradox, isn't it? To go up, you must go down. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant. Whoever would be first among you must be the slave of all. That's the way that Jesus says we work in the kingdom. That's the way that Jesus says if there's going to be any recognition for individuals, it will be through this, through our service and our love and our kindness and our caring for others and for their needs, for selflessness, not for constantly thinking, do I get to be number two? The way up for us is down. Let me connect this as we close with some points of application here. Number one is this: are you serving? Are you serving Jesus? Or is there things that you're doing to help? I told you this last week. I believe every healthy Christian should, number one, be engaged in a local church. Number two, should be engaged in ministry and mission. Ministry and mission. Ministry is something that you're doing amongst the body, and mission is something that you're doing for others that they might come to know Jesus. Intentionally trying to minister amongst one another, intentionally trying to minister to others that don't know Jesus. We have lots of ways that you can engage in that. We're going to have a serve day here very soon. If you haven't signed up for that, that's a really easy way to spend a day and engage in ministry and mission with others here in this church. Maybe God's called you to do something. Maybe there's a group that you want to work with. We got all kinds of areas around here where we would love to have help. And we're not going to just like kick you in. Like if you want to help with kids, okay, Becca's not going to like put you in the nursery, shut the door, and run away. We'll help you to understand our processes, and we'll have others that'll help you and serve with you. I mean, ultimately, let me tell you something as a pastor, all right? David, I don't know if we've talked about this or not, but I'm just going to spit it out. I really, our children's ministry is phenomenal here, isn't it? It is phenomenal. We have incredible workers. We have incredible leaders. But as a pastor, there's something that is weighing on my heart, and that is we put too much burden on the workers that volunteer, that they're there week after week after week. And we need more people to step up. That's just all there is to it. We need more people to step up so that there can be a rotation. So that if you serve in Sunday school for children's ministry, or if you serve during preschool, during church service, that everyone can get engaged in a small group still, and everyone can rotate and come into service. It shouldn't be that those who are stepping up to serve can never be a part of the rest of the body. And the simple answer is, we just need more people to say yes. So would you pray about that? Would you pray about being on that rotation? There's a lot of other ways that we can serve. That's just on my heart right now. Is that I would like to see us get to a point to where we have multiple people who are willing to take one Sunday a month or 2 Sundays a month, and that way the burden is shared and more people can rotate all around. And we just need that. I think we have that here, so I'm challenging you, church, to think about that. But there's other ways. How can you serve amongst the body here? How are ways that you can do that? Are you serving? Are you engaged in serving? Go to one of our ministry leaders where you felt led. Come to me or David and tell us, and we'll talk with you about ways that you can serve. We'll help you think about what are your gifts and talents and desires and passions and the opportunities that God has placed that you can walk in the good works amongst what He has called you unto. Maybe you're like the 10, and you've been harboring something for a long time. Or maybe you're like the 2, and maybe someone out of the 10 has hurt you. You need to ask for forgiveness. You need to go and make amends. Don't allow that to affect your life and your service to this church. If you walk in the doors, if you regret, if you have second thoughts about coming to church because so and so might be there, we need to get that right. We need to get that right. And last of all, maybe you've been living as number 1. You're not even concerned about number 2. You're just living for number 1. And you've come to realize that you need to trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior. That you are a sinner and that God's judgment is upon you. And you want to be a follower of Christ. I want to invite you to make that move, to trust in Christ, to repent